I'm Pat Ryan. I born in Kingston, raised in Hurley, on Jeffrey Lane, right up in Rolling Meadows. My family's been in Ulster County 5 generations on the Ryan side, and I'm very proud of my family's history here, and we're talking a little about that. That's something we can talk more about. My mom just retired as a teacher in Kingston Public Schools, and my dad just retired from running his own small business right on Hurley Avenue, called the Valley Group. I always think back on this story that my mom's dad, my grandpa, talked about after the attack on Pearl Harbor, how he actually lied about his age so that he could enlist in the Navy and fight in the war, and that always really stuck with me. And that story, watching both of my parents, who were really engaged citizens in our community in every way, I realized from a young age that our democracy, our values, progress in our country, I mean, it does not just happen. I mean, it has to be constantly renewed. We have to, especially now, fight for it. It's groups like this coming together when it's dark out and it's the middle of the week and showing up and doing our part. And I've always felt that responsibility to serve and do my part. It's what led me to West Point. It guided me through 2 deployments in Iraq in a war that I had real serious disagreements about us initiating, but in which I served because that's what I signed up to do. It inspired me to start a tech company when I got out of the Army, and it's driving me to run now. And I think we all know this. It's why we're here tonight. It's why we're at FASO Fridays every week, probably for a lot of you. We are at a crisis moment in the country. And I don't think we have to look much further than what just happened a little over 24 hours ago in Florida. And I mean, every day there are just more and more moments of shaking our head and being scared. And I think we have to figure out a way forward out of this. To me, the way forward, frankly, is a new set of leaders, particularly in Congress, leaders who have a record of actually putting their community and their country over themselves, and when needed, frankly, over their party, to get us out of this situation. Leaders who are not only going to stand up and resist all the bad that's happening, but who are also going to put forth a real plan for how we come out the other side better, and all of us able to thrive again. So, I mean, for me, that means leading in making substantive infrastructure investment here. It means moving from the outmoded fossil fuel-based economy to the new energy economy, both good for the environment and I also think would create jobs here. And it means fundamentally reforming our education and our training system in the country, where 70% of young people in the district don't finish college. And we're not doing enough to give other pathways for young people who want to put in the work. So those are some of the policy areas I'm focused on. And then I think the other thing we have to keep in mind is there is so much at stake in this election. I mean, November 6, 2018 has to be a pivotal turning point in the country, I believe. And with that in mind, and the fact that 60,000 people in our district healthcare is under attack, thousands of families working hard and still not making ends meet, many of them working multiple jobs, we have to win this seat. We have to win 23 and hopefully more seats in the House. And here in the 19th, we have to put forth a candidate that can actually deliver the win, that can beat John Faso. And I got in this race because I believe I can do that. My roots here, my record of service, my business experience and actual job creation experience, creating good jobs, tech jobs where we trained vets with tech skills after they came home from their service. I think we can apply that here. So that experience and a message of, even in a fractious time like this, how do we actually bring the country together again? That's how I think we win, in a place where, we not only have to turn out and energize and fire up every single Democrat, we have to also be able to speak to others that are not Democrat. That's the only way we win, and I think it's the only way we fix what's happening in the country. So I'll stop there and would love to hear your questions and your ideas. And I really appreciate, Mike, you having me and all you having me and being here.
You mentioned Faso, and he's going to be the main target, assuming you're the candidate. Something that I'm sure he is going to bring up is his vote on the healthcare bill. When he voted
he
against
probably
it.
won't bring. Oh, on the healthcare bill? Or?
The first vote, he voted against it,
Oh,
and I'm
well.
sure he had permission to do that because it was a vote that did not matter.
Because they had enough votes. That's right.
Do your homework on this one, because the record will show that he voted against the bill. But the one that mattered, the second vote, he voted with the Republicans.
Okay.
Do your homework on that. That's going to be an important thing.
Yeah.
Or ask her, she knows better than I do.
I hear you on that, but I think it's pretty clear. I mean, on the main bill that was going to move forward, he was the
Right.
deciding vote in committee.
Right.
I mean, I saved the front page of the Times Herald Record where it's his photo on the front showing him being the deciding vote. He voted for on the floor. He and Chris Collins proposed this
crazy
ridiculous
thing they
Right.
amendment, $2.3 billion a year in Medicaid dollars
Yep.
in a community that's being ravaged by the opioid epidemic, where thousands of people still don't have health care. I mean, we'll hit him real hard on that, I
Good.
think. And
Okay, good.
I think that and not showing up
Yep.
are his two biggest
When he
vulnerabilities.
makes the statement that, I don't always vote with my party, I vote for it, that's
Yeah.
going to be his line right there, and be ready for it.
No, I agree, and I think he'll do it on the tax bill for sure. That's where I think he'll really try to have it both ways.
Yep.
But I talked to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
To remember on tax bill, I think people have to understand that tax bill sunsets for the middle class
Yeah.
and not the corporations. So it's like throwing out a little piece of crumbs of bread.
Yep.
And sure, we're going to see a little bit of money in our checks for the next couple of years, but when it dries up, the corporations are still going to be getting their tax breaks, and who's going to be, pulling the chain there? It's going to be the middle
Well, if
class.
you're gonna take away the money you're getting, that little increase in healthcare cost and not being able to deduct your mortgage payments and these things. I mean, they're gonna give you a crumb and then they're gonna take it back in spades and,
Especially in New York.
yeah, absolutely.
gonna slam us.
And then the other piece, the $1.5 trillion that is being added to the deficit in order to go to ultra wealthy folks and big corporations, which could have gone to education, to infrastructure, to healthcare, to all these other things.
Right.
So I also think we have to remind people there was a real trade-off decision made here when we know we need to invest in our communities, and we're doing the exact opposite and giving more to people who already have way more than they need.
But there's a plan to this.
Oh, yes.
There's a plan to this,
Right.
because then they're gonna say they're too poor and they have to cut from Medicare and Medicaid and their social programs
Yep.
because they're poor after they had this deficit and gave all this money away. Now we have to slash these. And they assume people are gonna go along with that if we don't get out there and say it. And hammer it into people. If you're getting $10 a week or a month, it's not worth the cost that you're gonna have to pay.
Just the rise in healthcare premiums alone from repealing the mandate
Right.
is gonna, for most people who even got any savings from this tax bill, is gonna cancel out
Correct.
any of that. So, and I think people will see that, because that's gonna go into effect this year. So.
What do you think about the deficit that's growing now? With the tax cuts and so on, the deficit's getting bigger. Now they're talking about a couple trillion of infrastructure. How would you deal with that when you get in? Because you'll have the deficit in front of you, and anything you want to do for infrastructure is going to increase the deficit.
Yeah. So I think two thoughts on this. One is that there's a difference between costs and expenses and investment. And I think we have to talk more about the fact that real substantive infrastructure investment, unlike a trickle-down approach that Trump just put forward, real infrastructure investment will increase GDP and will make our economy more productive, unlike the failed logic that we've seen now fail twice of a trickle-down approach. So I think that's one way to say the decision to invest in infrastructure, it needs to be thought of in a different way. And then the other thing that we were actually talking about, I was out in Dutchess County last night, and I was talking about the concept of a war tax. This is something that to me is very important. I think if you look at what's happened in our country since September 11th in particular, we've we've spent anywhere from $5 to $6 trillion in the post 9/11 wars, and that's going to keep adding up with all the veterans benefits and health benefits owed to our vets, which we should honor, obviously. And there was never any discussion, honest discussion with the American people of the costs that we were going to incur. So I think that going forward, anytime we're going to actually authorize use of military force, one, Congress needs to actually play their constitutionally defined role to do it. And two, we should have a serious discussion about a specific way to pay for that as best we can estimate the costs. And that also, I think, would result in a much more honest conversation about the decision to use military force, which to this point it's been too easy to just do it because it feels free to way too many Americans, and that's something that to me I take very seriously, having had the experiences that I had. So that's another just related but idea that I talk about.
Yeah.
Let's take one or two more questions. Sure.
I'm wondering what you think Faso will come after you with. What will he, in your record or your background, will he attack you for?
Yeah. So I think if I'm him, I'm going to use the same attack that the Republicans have used over and over, not just here, but everywhere, which is, you're a Nancy Pelosi robot who's going to come bring your liberal values into our backyard and destroy everything that's special and great. And in particular, I think even though I'm born and raised here and my parents and my family's been here for 5 generations, he'll say, yeah, but you left and now you're coming back. And I think that's the best attack he has, and it's worked. And the sort of the quote unquote carpetbagger attack has worked in the past. I think it doesn't stick very well on me, and I actually think it gives me the opportunity to talk about, I was born and raised here, I left to serve, I'm back to continue to serve. And if that's a problem, then I'm guilty as charged. And I think that that's a pretty strong response on that, and he doesn't have a lot of maneuver room to go back on that. So that's what
I think every Democrat that runs should, in their ads, say something to defend Nancy Pelosi. We lived in Oklahoma, that's all it was. Everywhere you go, that's all it is. They make her out a demon. Somebody has to show the good work this woman has done. They've demonized her to the point that she's just something they can beat up on.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it seems to work.
It works, but that's because nobody comes to her defense. Nobody says, I stand with Nancy Pelosi when we want to do DACA. I stand with her when we want to save women's health care. All these things that she stands for should count for something. I don't know what they think she is. No. She's a lovely grandmother, as far as I can see, who stands for everything I stand for.
Yeah.
All you have to do is look at Scott Pruitt from Oklahoma.
God. From Oklahoma.
I oversaw Oklahoma as a regional director, and they're suffering earthquake after earthquake out there from shooting the fracking water back down into our crust of our earth. So it's.
But don't worry, he's in his first class. He's got his first class seats all taken care of. So.
He's an idiot. Why do you think I had to escape?
I think the most important thing you said, though, is that this election is going to be pivotal for our democracy.
Absolutely.
We are under full attack. The fake news, just a constant using of that phrase.
Yep.
And you just look through the channels of the different news organizations, and I can't even watch it anymore. But one of the things that I'd like to hear from you is how do you think you can break through and get bipartisanship, because we're so divided right now?
Yeah.
What is the plan? Because Maurice always said that the art of the compromise is how you get things done. You can't always get what you want. You get what you need.
Yep.
The old Rolling Stones song.
It's a good song.
No, how are we going to break that division?
It's the main reason one of the main reasons I got in this race is that worry that we are so divided that people aren't even talking to each other, a lot of people anymore, because of a letter, before or after their name. And I think the people who are actually paying the price in that situation are all of our friends and neighbors who are actually just need a lot of help on a whole bunch of issues. So I don't know, I go back to, like we all do, my personal experience, particularly my time serving. I'm a young lieutenant. I know not a whole lot, just enough to be dangerous, and I'm responsible for 20 lives. In my case, it was all young men because I was in an infantry unit. And this group was from all over the country, totally different backgrounds, from rural Louisiana to another soldier from inner city Chicago. I mean, we could not have had more differences, from sports teams to everything else. And under a very tough situation, to see us come together because we all realized there was something so much greater than ourselves at stake. That gives me hope that it is possible. And we have done this as Americans in very, very difficult times before. And I frankly, I think it's about reminding people that there are core American values that transcend the divides that people want to put us in. And I go back to literally the Declaration of Independence, where you read, it should have said all people, it said all men, but that all people, all humans, have these inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that government is formed to secure those rights for all. And when they're not being secured for all, that's when government needs to play that role. And that we're all better when everyone has those rights. And those are foundational American ideals that I think we can remind people of again. It's not going to happen overnight, but I'm part of a group of about 20 service. The term we use is servant leaders, people who have served in the military or the Peace Corps or Teach for America or other public service programs, and we're trying to get a cadre of a critical mass of people who actually have that record of putting something before themselves and their party. And I think we could almost be a counterbalance to the Freedom Caucus type groups that are trying to rip us apart and really about greed, in my opinion, and counter that with a sense of community and a group that's willing to do that. So I don't think I could do it myself, but I do think as part of a group of people with that mindset, we could change the tenor over time.
I see the Olympics as sort of trying to put that message out.
Yeah.
With that commercial that they do about.
Yeah.
I think that's powerful, and every time it comes on, I like seeing it. But
I hear from a lot of people when I'm traveling around, how this some version of the question you asked, like how are we gonna? We're all very scared about what's the current administration, but almost the second thing I hear from people is, but how do we come together? Because I think people inherently recognize that the divisiveness is what got us into the situation where we have the current administration that we've got. And if we don't fix that, then we're just going to keep repeating this cycle. And I think it is the existential challenge our country faces. And we've done it before. I was talking to somebody today, and then I'll stop rambling. I was talking to somebody today about the late 1800s. You had just had the Industrial Revolution between power and steam power and train, and our economy was transformed. You had massive income inequality in our whole country, and that's when the labor movement started, and that's when government got involved and started to create a lot of reforms that allowed us to accommodate that new system and actually make sure everybody was taken care of. And we're at one of those moments again, and we got to think big in how we're going to tackle it.
the thing that scares me the most is the way the judiciary is changing so fast,
Yep.
and people don't even realize it.
At
And it could
the
have an
ground
impact for
level.
the next 30 years.
It's very scary.
And
Could you talk to healthcare and what you would propose to fix the healthcare system? Do you believe in single payer, Medicare for all? Do you have a different plan?
Yeah, so I think the overarching aim is universal coverage for every American that's affordable and quality. And most importantly, speed of making that happen, knowing where a lot of people in the country are at and the administration we're under. So I'm focused on what plan can we put in place like now that will get coverage to the folks that need help. I think the one that's most likely to happen would be a public option based on Medicare, so a Medicare opt-in, which would allow anyone to opt into that. I think we could actually get it passed now, even under, assuming we take the House, which I think we will. I think we could get that through, and that would help people that need help now. And then I do think that ultimately we get to a single payer Medicare for all type system. It's just a question of how quickly can we get there.
That would be for a basic coverage, and if you wanted more coverage, you buy your supplemental plans.
Sure, I mean, even just like people that currently have
Yes,
Medicare
that's
have
what I'm
to
saying.
get some supplemental. We would also need to look at, like, the current Medicare levels of coverage don't meet all the needs of some of the other populations that would be opting in. So for example, hearing aids aren't currently covered.
No.
And a lot of dental or even no dental. So we need to figure out all the other pieces we need to add in to
Medicare now covers dental implants.
He works for Medicare.
I work at Medicaid. Well, here's the problem. Medicare will cover the implant. They do not cover the
procedure?
restoration of the implant,
Yeah.
meaning the post and the crown that goes on.
Medicare or Medicaid?
Medicare for seniors now covers implants.
That's right.
Okay.
Then they come to Medicaid to try and get the crowns, and we do
Right.
nothing with implants. They're screwed.
Yes. And
So-
hearing aids should be covered.
And the big thing that I hear
Huh?
from people when I
Pardon me.
ask them about this is, almost everybody I talk to is supportive of the idea that we all should have coverage. Their worry is that in transitioning, am I going to give up what I currently have? And people are very concerned about, will I lose the coverage that, there are a lot of people that are relatively happy with their coverage. Granted, the cost is too high, but we have to really, the details are going to matter here to be able to convince folks that we've got a plan that they can be assured that they're going to get that coverage.
Well, Medicare's got a whole series of
Right,
levels that you can come in on.
right.
You'll go into a managed care type plan, or you got your individuals,
Advantage
and again, at different levels.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we have to meet again because I have immigration, guns, Citizens
Yes.
United, voter suppression,
So
the
are we-
Russian
We already
attack.
have the election.
They failed in every attempt in the Senate today to get something through.
Of
On
course they
immigration,
did.
But the president's got the fewest votes. I think it got 39. One got 54 and one got 52 votes. They
So
failed in all.
at least I want to make sure we talk about guns, given what
Yes.
just happened, because I'm almost at a loss for words.
I am
really
terrified. My 11-year-old grandson going to school, and they have these drills where they turn out the lights, they lock the doors and stuff. These are children. It's terrifying.
It's going to
We
leave.
used to have to dive under the desk and
Well, I did too.
Kiss
but
your
that-
ass
yes,
goodbye.
well, you were kissing your ass goodbye if there was a nuclear attack. But now it's
but this is a
some
little bit
crazy
worse because that
person.
was something that was
Yeah,
when we've had 18 of these
in 45
in
days.
this
I mean,
year.
I like my firearm, but there's nobody that needs to have an AR-15 with a 40 clip mag. There's no reason for bump stocks. I mean,
Exactly, and I think we are at a point in our country where we have to have that conversation, and a big priority for me is I think I can help lead this conversation, given that I grew up around people who were responsible gun owners, that I've been issued a weapon and trained on it and understand how to take care of it and secure it. But I've also seen the damage and the violence firsthand that these weapons of war can inflict, and they absolutely have no place in schools, at concerts and churches and so many other places. And we have to be able to say that is a line that we can all agree on.
well, once you go north of here and you get into the other parts of the district, that the feelings that you're going to get out there in Delaware County and out toward Broome County, and because part of growing up in rural America is going hunting and. But those other
now people are
guns
hunting
are
human
those
beings.
weapons of war
If you
are
need to hunt,
not something
if you need to
that
hunt
we
with
need.
an AR-15, you're not a
You're
very
a
good
bad
hunter.
hunter. You're
one
a cheater.
bullet.
One
That's all you
bullet,
should
one
take.
arrow.
Bullet. I
But
saw
you're a
the
hunter.
effects of war as a nurse in Vietnam, and let me tell you, we don't need it on the streets of America. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Speaking about use and guns, people are saying, oh, it's terrible, you know, what they did, that shot 17 people in Florida. But I have a huge feeling about children being raised with discipline. You don't have to beat them, you don't have to do that. But children have been raised nowadays with, go ahead, you know, you do that. They're expressing themselves, let them go. They need to express themselves. Well, guess what? They're expressing themselves today, but they're using bullets. And it goes back to the basic thing. They have to have the structure and the discipline and the background of knowing that they have
Consequences.
They have consequences and they have boundaries. They don't know boundaries. It's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. You can't say let them express themselves and then when they shoot somebody, oh, that's horrible. They're just using bullets. That's the only difference.
Yeah, and I also think that, you know, for especially very young kids, to think that they're going to understand the real world implications of what picking up a weapon might do is, it's not realistic, right? And so it's imperative, especially with video, right? I mean, it's imperative on us to not just, we need to remove that as an option that could even happen. But I agree, we also have to talk more about consequences. And you know, my mom just retired, and one of the most heartbreaking stories she told me from her last year teaching out at Chambers was that for the first time in her whole career, 0 of her 22 students' parents came in for parent-teacher conferences. 0. And I think there are a lot of reasons why. A lot of them are probably working 2-3 jobs and couldn't make it, or had other kids and couldn't get childcare. But we are fundamentally, the strain we're putting on our schools and our social services and other systems is not, it's breaking down, and we got to figure out how we fix that. I don't know how you fix that problem, but I was so sad when I heard that from her. And I think there's multiple pieces to fixing it, but that's what we're dealing with right now.
They always talk about mental health in Congress, mental health, but they just keep taking the money away from that. They're not doing anything to provide mental health for these kids. This kid in Florida was messed up.
They said they want
Totally
to change the
messed
law to allow the doctors, when he's seeing a mental health patient, to ask him if he has a firearm. They can't ask
You
that.
can't do that.
Yeah.
That was voted down. The
Yeah.
doctor can't
Crazy.
ask if there's a gun in your household. Why can't he?
If
That
it's
is
domestic violence, they can ask you.
Yeah.
If
It's
there's
insane.
a domestic violence incident at your home, the first thing the police ask is if you have firearms, and if you do, they confiscate every one of them, and you don't get them back until that's gone through the courts and they're satisfied. So if you're mentally unstable,
And these are common sense things that I think if you talked about this to the American people, we could get support for this stuff. I mean, these are logical, very common sense things, and I think
when you got big money like the NRA and the Koch brothers,
Well,
Right.
that's the other,
I mean,
Citizens United.
in the last data I've seen, 70% of gun owners don't feel that the NRA represents their interests any
Right.
longer. I think there's a big opportunity to actually drive that wedge and say, look, they're
I used
not
to be an NRA member, and I haven't been in 10 years.
perfect example.
Does FASO take NRA member?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
thousands.
Thousands.
I mean, FASO
So
voted
that's a
for
good issue.
the two of the bills that have come up, and you're probably tracking this. One was this, they called it a Hearing Protection Act, which is
Oh, the suppressors.
unbelievable.
Suppressors, yeah.
It was suppressors. And imagine if in that school
Silencers.
yesterday there were silencers and suppressors, even more people would have been killed. And then the second bill is this concealed carry reciprocity bill, which would have allowed someone from Florida who legally obtained a weapon to come and bring it in to our state
Carry any
here.
place in the US.
Yes.
Yeah.
And though it's
And
against
even
our laws.
the entire law enforcement community is against this law, and FASO was vocally in favor of both of those pieces of legislation. And it's not coincidental that, you know, he's got an A rating from the NRA and he's taken thousands of dollars from them. So
Well, we did see the other day that the Koch brothers and the 19th district have come into focus, so.
we know that they're going to come in just like they did last time. There were millions between the Kochs and the Mercers, and
Like you said, the Citizens United, until that's overturned, When you spend $50 million on a special congressional election down in Georgia,
Unbelievable.
I mean, the people are not voting that person in, it's the money.
Yep.
The money.
And I think we're at an existential situation with the campaign finance. I don't know that we could get support for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, but I think we gotta try and we gotta make the case. It is broken. It is truly broken.
Hugely broken.
And it's really, I feel like it's rotting our system from the inside out. It really,
Absolutely.
To use a
All
funny
that
term we
money,
always hear, it's
what
bigly
good
broken.
stuff could be done in this country if we had the money they pour into these elections. We could solve many of these problems.
Yeah.
There's so much money out there, and it's all going to one side.
Pat,
Well-
could you just say a little bit about what you did for those 6 years, when you came back, what the business was that you did and your two partners?
yeah.
'Cause I think that's your vulnerable spot, but that's your strong spot.
So when I was serving, there's one particular day that I will never personally forget. It was January 28th of 2008. I had been in Mosul for about 3 weeks, and we were a new unit. We just had replaced another unit, and the city was very bad at the time, extremely violent. There were parts of the city that the previous unit wouldn't even go to. They said, we just don't go there. And of course, we're the new unit coming in thinking we're tough and we're gonna go there. And so we got a piece of information. I was the intelligence officer. We got a piece of information that there was a senior Al-Qaeda leader in this one neighborhood that was a sort of an off-limits neighborhood. And I had to make, with the little bit of information I had, because we were brand new, there was no data about what was going on in this area. I made the recommendation to send a platoon of 30 soldiers into this neighborhood. And they went in and they got the target. And on their way out, they unfortunately came out the same route that they came in. And the first vehicle with 5 soldiers, 5 American young men in it, hit a huge roadside bomb and instantly just obliterated the vehicle and killed them all instantly. And I think probably for the rest of my life, I will wonder if I had had better information, if I had been able to, could I have stopped that if I had had more information, basically. The reality was, even though we had been in Mosul and Iraq for 5-6 years at that point, I didn't have any of the data or information that from the previous units that would have told me that actually this was a historic location where these bombs were often buried, and we probably shouldn't have gone, or we definitely should have gone a different way. And I don't think I even realized it at the time, but when I got out of the Army, I wanted to fix this problem, and I think it was really tied back to this one incident. And it was, we started this company to fix that exact problem, to get better information to our troops going into harm's way. And so it was a data analytics company. I co-founded it with one woman I had served with and another woman I had worked with previously. And I'm very proud of what we built. Not only did we have a real mission impact and grow a successful business, we grew it to over 150 employees, but we paid our employees very well. We had very generous benefits. We were one of the first companies to have not just maternity leave, but paternity leave. And so, yeah, I'm very proud of what we built in those few years between my military time and running.
So now they have better equipment in the war that they're fighting, still fighting.
Yeah, and if we're gonna send, if we're gonna send young men and women into harm's way, we have to give them the absolute best that we possibly can to keep them as safe as we possibly can. And the fact that you had a few big defense companies that totally dominate the system, really, truly what Eisenhower warned against in his farewell speech about the military-industrial complex, it's alive and well, and it was costing lives. And I just was not willing to let that happen. So we ended up fighting a lot of the very broken defense acquisition policies. And I'm not embarrassed or upset to admit it, but John McCain is actually one area I agree with him on. He's quite ahead on reforming the defense acquisition system. I give him credit for that and fixing this issue, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know you went over your time. And,
Yeah,
I don't want you to get a speeding ticket on
Don't
the
get a
thruway.
My campaign manager got pulled over the other night because he had his taillight out. So I knew, but it was a trooper, and she was really nice, and
I
she
did a
let
lot
us
of
go.
the ignition interlocks for the DWI. I'd get a speeding ticket every now and then. It was one of the judges that I trained across the state. I always told them when I did my training in my seminar, that I don't drink and drive, but I do have a lead foot, so you may see me in your court.
Yeah.
So safe trip up, and
Thank
we'd
you.
like to hear more when you
Yes,
have
thank you very
some more
much.
time.
Yeah.
Stay in touch with us.
Happy to come
I'll try-
anytime.
You know, we sponsored part of the Woodstock debate. We
Yep.
were part of that, and I told Laura up there that we may want to do something a little bit bigger and talk to the folks that own the Woodstock Playhouse.
Oh, that'd be great.
And, you know, and put it up on both, you know, the public stations, and this part of Hurley and West Hurley is on the Woodstock station, and you have the other part of Hurley that's on the Kingston station, so
Right.
we need to try to get it out there, but I think that it would be a good venue to pull a lot of people in. I know the other one was pretty packed. I couldn't make it because I just had surgery.
It was 662 people, I think.
I told her we should
People
do
were
it
getting
bigger
turned
venue.
away. And I think it was a 200-person capacity. It was awesome. I mean, to feel that energy, man.
But the Woodstock Playhouse is a very nice venue.
Yeah.
It's, so I think that maybe, you know, we can do something that
Great.
Would help. So
I really appreciate you all having me.
Thank
and
you.
Sorry to run out of here,
I
but
think Max is staying, so
oh,
if you guys want to
good.
chat Max too.
And you can kick them out if
Yeah, absolutely.
talk about secret stuff or
Yeah.
anything like that.
Thank you.
Secret side,
thank you,
society
Brett.
We're all signed.
off-site here?
Oh, so you gonna take this?
I'm a bad woman, I shouldn't say these things.
And we'll leave some cards too. And I always say this, and no one ever calls. But this is my phone that I carry with me, and no one ever calls. So please call me.
Beware. Oh,
do the same
he'll
thing.
call you
I'll
with
give you a
another
call.
joke if nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, especially now, I can always use a joke. So
You got it.
There you
all
go.
right, thank
Some
you.
more.
Thank you.
Take care.
Feel free to use that one I told you.
That was good. I'm not a good joke teller though.
Me
so
either.
Yeah, it's not.
I'm just his audience.
All right, thank you, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
You want this?
Be late. Go slow.
Yeah, we won't speed.
75.